Morning, as we go to the Chitas of today, we're holding in Parshas Yisro. We're holding on fifth reading. Today is Thursday. We're holding the fifth reading, chapter 19, verse number 7. Moshe Rabbeinu came and called the elders of the people. And he put before them as kol advarim eila, all these words, asher tziva Hashem, which God commanded. Vayanu kolam yachtav, and the entire Jewish nation answered as follows. Yanakov yemru kol asher dibra Hashem, whatever the Eibishter says, nasa we will do. Vayashav Moshe's dibra alavaya, and Moshe Rabbeinu conveyed the words of God to God, the words of the people to God. Rashi says this was in the next day, which was the third day of the month. We are slowly moving up to the days of the month. Wherever he has descended the mountain to speak to God, it was first thing in the morning. But it's necessary for Moshe to convey the Israel's reply as God. Why is it necessary? The Abish knows everything. Rather, the Torah comes to teach you proper behavior from Moshe's example. But he didn't say, since he who sent me knows the reply anyway, I need not to convey it. But here, Moshe Rabbeinu conveyed the reply, and he always teaches us you need to reply, whether you think the person knows it, or you think the person doesn't know it, you need to respond. Behold, I'm coming to you in a thickness of the cloud, so that the people hear when I speak to you, they will believe in you forever. Yagid Moshe Divraham Elavaya, and Moshe Rabbeinu told the words of the people, reported the people's response to God. Nashis Ba'ava Onan, in the thickness of a cloud, and this is the Arafel. This is what's called also Arafel, mentioned later, Arafel. Thick cloud. Gam B'cha, Gam B'nevim Habayim Achrecha. Also, not only will they believe in you, but they'll believe in the prophets that come after you. Yagid Moshe, and Moshe Rabbeinu told them the words of the people on the next day, which is the fourth day. As Divram, Moshe Rabbeinu said to them, I've heard from them a reply to this message, that you'll speak to them through me, that they wish to hear directly from you. They don't want to hear it from me. For one who hears something from a messenger cannot be compared to one who hears it from the king himself. They said, we want to see our king. Let's say, Neino, Lire, says Malkeinu. Our desire is to see the Eibishter, God himself. Okay, so he said, if they want to hear me, Leichalam, go down to the people. Then go down and tell them that they need to prepare themselves for the day and tomorrow. They need to go and wash their clothes. Now she says, Im Kain, if that's what they require, they want I should speak to them, then vikidashtem, you have to make them ready. That what it means to say that one should prepare themselves today and tomorrow. And therefore they should be ready for the third day. Because on the third day, the Eibishter God will come down to the entire nation of Har Sinai and the Mount Sinai. Rashi says they should separate, they shouldn't have relationships because it brings impurity when a person has a relationship. Which is the 6th of the month. So now we know that the Torah was given officially on the 6th of the month. On the 5th of the month, Moshe built the altar at the foot of the mountain and the 12 monuments. The entire narrative recounts at the end of Parshas Ve'ela Mashpatim. For the Torah is not necessarily written, again, in chronological order. Le'ene kolam, Hashem teaches us there was no blind person amongst them. Everybody was healed. Everybody was healed. Everybody could see. If God forbid there was a blind Jew there, he couldn't. He saw. And then you should make a boundary. Since they want that I should come down the mountain, then you need to make sure that there's a boundary. Be careful going up this mountain. The Geber could say, even touching the edge of this mountain, because whoever touches the mountain will die. Rashi says, set up boundaries. mark is indicating that they must not come closer beyond this boundary. Lamer, Rashi says, the boundary itself says to them, be careful to ascend this point, and you too warn them about this. This is an important thing. People might get excited, inspired to come close. When the gay say, I feel it with in the edge. Verse 13, do not touch it by yod, even a finger. Because they will be cast down, or yada, or they will fall down, they will be thrown down. In behema, whether it's an animal, in ish, whether it's a man, they will not live. When the ram's horns sound a long blast, then they may ascend the mountain. Now she says the interesting thing, because we learn one of the punishments in the Torah is skila, which is stoning. So here we see that she says a general law that when a person is stoned, they are first pushed down from a high place, and then they are stoned. The high place means a double size of man, at least 15 feet. 10 feet. Yada yushlach lamatala. Yada means they're thrown. Meshech hayovel. When the ram's horn sound a long note, it signifies departure, divine presence, and the end of the divine voice. And I am God, departed from the mountain. They're allowed to ascend it. Hayovel. What does the mean? Yovel is jubilee. So the ram's horn for a bear ram is called yuvla. It was the fact that the home of the ram sacrificed instead of the Isaac. This is the Yovel. This is the later on we learned that the year of Yovel we sound the shofar, on the Yom Kippur of Yovel we sound the ram's horn Yuvla. And Moshe came down the mountain, Elohim to the people, Vayikadesh Esa'am, Vayichapsum, Simleisam, and they washed their clothes into the mikveh, basically. Mina Aram, from the mountain to the people. This teaches us that Moshe did not stop to tend his personal affairs. It was a very busy time for him. He went from the people to the mountain to the people, from the mountain to the people, and from the people to the mountain. Verse 25, verse 15, I'm sorry. He said to the people, get ready. For 3 days, I'll Isha, do not have any relationships. Do not engage in marital relationships. Now she said to the end of 3 days, which is the 4th day, but Moshe Rabbeinu, by his own reasoning, added a day to the time God stated, so 6th day to the 7th day. This is according to the opinion of It's a big machlekes in the Gemara. When was the Torah given? Was it given on the 6th of Nisan or on the 7th of Nisan? So according to Rabbi Yossi, Moshe Rabbeinu added another day, which is the 7th Nisan. According to opinion, that the Ten Commandments were given on the 6th of the month. Moshe did not add anything. And this is the meaning, she says the machlekes in the Gemara that it was a Torah given on the 6th of the month to the 7th month. It's not exactly clear. Some people hold it was the 6th and some people hold it was the 7th. Rashi says all these 3 days so that the woman will be able to richly immerse himself in the 3rd day and thus be rich. So really this was for the women, because a man can go to the mikveh right the next day after a relationship. But a woman needs to wait at least 3 days after a relationship. By ritual purity, we see the Torah of course, if they had marital relation during these 3 days, the woman might discharge semen after her ritual immersion and again become ritually impure. After she waited 3 days, the semen is already putrid and cannot germinate. So it does not confer ritual impurity upon one who discharges it, and therefore this is the laws of impurity. So therefore this law, this is what God said, to wait for 3 days, was for the women to be at Matan Torah, so they wouldn't have any issues. Happened on the 3rd day, base breaker. Happened on the 3rd day, and then in the early morning, there was a thunder and lightning. And there was a heavy mountain, there was a heavy cloud on the mountain. And there was extremely a loud blast of the shofar. The entire people trembled in the camp. Now she says, it teaches us that the divine revelation preceded their arrival. This practice is unlike humans, that the teacher should wait for the student. Usually the teacher should wait for the student. Over that, usually students wait for the teacher. So over here, the teacher came early. So it says he had to wake him up. When he came, they were all sleeping. And that we find in Chesed, God said to me, arise and go to the valley, and there I'll speak to you. So I arose and went out to the valley, and behold, the glory of God was already standing there. So God makes sure to come first. The Moshe Rabbeinu brought out the people towards the divine presence. And they took their places at the foot of the mountain. Asher, this tells us that the divine presence came out to greet them like a bridegroom going out to greet his bride. And this too is what is meant when God came from Sinai. He does not say came to Sinai, he came from Sinai. So that's why, even till today, the chassan walks towards the kala, walks towards his bride, even though she's walking towards him, but he also walks towards her. According to its straightforward meaning, it means at the foot of the mountain, but the Midrash explained that the mountain was pulled from its place and held over them. This is a famous Medrash, Gemara, that Kafalem Harkegigis, they able to put the mountain, but Tachtasar, they were underneath the mountain for a certain period of time. Mamish, God picked up the mountain, and they were now underneath the mountain. Harasina, verse 18, Ashan Kula in the mountain of Sinai was smoking. Yeah, Shayot Allah Hashem, because God came upon it. Be'esh with fire. Ayala Shana Ke'esh and Akifshan, and the smoke rose up like the smoke of a lime kiln. Yechad Kala Amar Yod, and the people extremely fearful. Ashes Ashan Kulay. Ashes Ashan is not a noun, the shin vocalized a patach. Verb says similar Amar Shamar. Kifshan, Nashi says lime. I might have thought that smoke was similar to that of a kiln, but no greater. If for Torah states, actually, the mountain burned with fire that rose up in the midst of the heaven. So why does the Torah mention a kiln? To explain in a comprehensible manner. It gives the people a metaphor. It's a famous Rashi, the Eibush to Lishbar Oizen. That's the expression in Hebrew. It doesn't translate exactly in English. Lishbar es Oizen, to break the air, so to say, that a human being can comprehend. So really, this is a great fire and an unbelievable situation. But we give an analogy. So most people in those days, I don't know about today, know what a kiln is. But those days for sure, that they knew what a kiln is, and they had so it was a good metaphor. It gives a prep and relates to them. Similarly, we find God roars like a lion. Now, who gave the lion strength if not he? So what do you mean God roars like a lion? God's roar is much greater than a lion. But everybody knows that a lion's roar is a very strong roar. Actually, it can be heard from miles away. Taylor compares it to a lion. However, the reason for this is that we describe him as a similar to creatures in order to us to easily comprehensible language. The person should understand it. Similarly, we find in his sound was like the sound of much water, like a waterfall. Now, who gave water a sound? If not he, the Eibishter created sound to water. So how are you comparing the creator to the creation? So I can't compare it to an analogy. However, you describe him by comparing him to the creatures because the way is easily, again, the shabet es oizen, the way the ear can handle. The sound of the shofar grew increasingly louder. Moshe spoke, and the God responded to the weakness of his mortal voice by amplifying his voice. Very interesting expression. Rashi says, it grew increasingly louder. The manner of ordinary people is that the longer one continues to blow a horn, its sound weakens and fades. He has no koyach. But here it became increasingly louder. And why was it quieter at first? In order to make again the Shabbat Azneim. So here again, that the Eibishter starts minakal el akoved, from the easy to the hard. You don't go to a person and tell them the hard things right away. start off with the easy so that the person can start to listen. The Eibishter started to understand and receptive to what they would be able to hear, and he went from the easy to the hard. Moshe Yadaber, what does that mean? Moshe was speaking. When Moshe was speaking and proclaiming the remaining commandments, is because Moshe Rabbeinu didn't say the first two commandments; they were heard by God Himself. They were said by God Himself. But they heard the Almighty directly only the first two commandments: "I am your God, and not to possess any deities." That's a question. So imagine Moshe Rabbeinu. So I can understand the whole nation heard God, but how did the whole nation, millions of people, there were at least at least a mile, took them to space. So you imagine filling up a space with a couple of million of people. How did Moshe had no loudspeakers? So the Eibishter made Moshe Rabbeinu a loudspeaker. Simple meaning of the verse. So the one who will bless me assist him by giving him the strength that his voice reverberate and it be heard. Because if not, it would be impossible in a logical way how Moshe Rabbeinu spoke to the people. He can speak to a group, but how does Moshe Rabbeinu's voice heard to millions of people at in one place? It's just not possible. It's impossible. Therefore, the Torah tells us that the Eibishter so the Eibishter took his voice and made it pashut, amplified his voice. And then Bekel means God responded to him regarding the voice. This is similar to Shenana Be'esh, meaning who will answer regarding the fire by making it the sense the Eibishter responded to Moshe Rabbeinu. God, as we say, Moshe Rabbeinu was a conduit of God. He didn't say anything. He didn't do anything what God didn't want. He did exactly an action, speech, and thought what the Eibishter wanted. And Nenu Bekel, he just amplified. He was an amplifier. He was a conduit for God's voice. And that completes the Chumash for today. We go now to the Tanya of the day. We're holding the 24th chapter of Tanya. Alter Rebbe is talking about the concept of an Aveda. The word Aveda, we translate as sin, but actually the word Aveda comes from an over, laver, which means to move away. To move away. So we have the Eibishter created the pathway, halicha. That's why halacha is called lahilich. It's a pathway, the way of life. And when a person moves away, he decides that he's moving away from this pathway. He's separating himself from the pathway of God, starting to go on a different pathway. And he might think that's a very smart thing. But as the Alter Rebbe is going to say, that's why the Torah calls a person who walks away from this pathway, decides to cut himself off from God's way of life, is a foolish thing, because it's basically going against what the Eibishter created that person for. We have a general statement. A person says, "Ani loy nevresi." It's a Mishnah in Pirkei Avos. Ani loy nevresi el shamash eshkeini. I was not created but to serve God. That's what I was created for. I was created to serve HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So that's my purpose. That's my agenda. And that's my way. That's the way. That's the Jewish way. Any other way is going off my way, my natural way. And why would anybody go off the natural way? That's a stupid thing to do. That's not natural. So something that's not natural is basically, for the person that's doing it, he's doing a moment of folly. It's a moment. It's what's called in America the sanity clause. It's doing an act of insanity. So let's learn it. This explains the Kabbalah. And this is what our sages said. Allah pasuk on the verse. It says, if a man's wife turns aside, God forbid. We have a whole story in the Torah, the law of infidelity, the law of asaita, and the Torah uses the word over here, kisishtes ishtay. If a man turns aside, like an Aveda, turns aside, sister, that's the meaning of the simple word. If a woman goes astray, she's married, Baruch Hashem, and she decides to have another husband. She decides to have another relationship with another person. And the Gemara says, why does it say sishta? It's an interesting word. The sishta can have many meanings. The simple meaning is move away. But there's also meaning ishtus, stupidity, folly, stupidity. And the Gemara says, because no man transgresses, no man does an Aveda, and Adam Aveda, v'chulu. The Alter Rebbe doesn't want to even put in the words what the Gemara says. That's why when the Alter Rebbe puts v'chulu, it means etc. Go look at the Gemara. What the Gemara says, to put in practice over here, Ein Adam Eva Aveda, a person doesn't do a sin, Elim Kein Nichnas by Ruach Shtus. And that's the continuation of the Gemara. Unless the spirit of folly, stupidity, has entered into him. That's why the Torah uses the word sishta, stupidity. In essence, the Torah wants to give a general rule, a general concept to the meaning of going off one's nature. It's a stupidity. You have to be in Chassidus, you have shtus d'kedusha, stupidity and holiness, because even holiness is crazy. It's not the natural way. It's going crazy, spiritually crazy. And there's shtus d'klippa. There's stupidity in the other side. Doing an Aveda is being stupid on the other side. So the sages, really, the root tishta, turned aside to the word shtus, folly. Even an adulterous woman with a frivolous nature. That means a person, a woman, or a man, really, both are the same. But here the Torah is talking about a woman that does an act of infidelity is a stupid act. We all can agree. Nobody gains out of infidelity. You're not happily married, get divorced and get married to somebody else. Gesundheit. But to do an act of infidelity in a marriage, it's a stupid thing. And I better agree to that. It doesn't make sense. It's not the right thing to do. And that's not the way to go. It's a stupid act. It's folly. And why? So why does a person do it? Because he has a taiva. He has a desire. And it's a strong desire is not something to be to play around with. It's something that the person needs to take it serious. Because why? Could control her passionate drive. And so why can't she control her passionate drive? Or why can't the person control this passion? It's because he thinks he can't control it. He thinks that's the way to go. He thinks that that's the only way he can do it. The only way he can do it is by doing a stupid act. So he's basically falling into this foolishness. Really, he knows that it's a stupid act. We all know that we're doing a stupid act. And it doesn't make really sense. And it's only going to hurt us all. But he can't control. He thinks he can't control it. He thinks that basically this is the only way to do it. Is to do this stupid act. And that's going to satisfy his needs. It's going to be a terrible situation. Because this stupidity, this covers over, this folly covers over his true essence. Because he's a good person. We're all good people. Why would a person want to hurt himself, want to hurt anybody else, even if, especially somebody you loved, even if somebody didn't? Why would anybody want to hurt somebody? Nobody wants to hurt anybody. People do stupid acts because they think that they're not hurting somebody else, or they think they can get away with it, or they think that nobody saw it, or they think it's not going to affect it. It's not going to affect them. They'll get away with it, and people won't know, and they'll get, and they'll be able to accomplish what they need to accomplish, and they won't hurt anybody. But emes is the emes, something that they'll never be able to, maybe never be able to live down. Because the truth is he wants to cleave to God, into oneness. There's no Jew, talking over here, the Alter Rebbe is talking with the man and God. No Jew wants to go and do something against his creator. No Jew wants to separate himself from God. Every Jew is ready to give up their life, not to worship idol worship, chas v'shalom. So meaning even this adulteress were willing to sacrifice her life rather than submit to coercion of practicing idolatry, but she's still an adulteress. So you can imagine, here she's willing to give up herself for life for God, but she can't control her taiva. She can't control her desire, that she have this desire. I'm ready to give my life up to God, not to bow down to him, but this desire I can't control. It doesn't make sense. That itself doesn't make sense. So if a Jew is ready to give up his life to God, he can't control a desire, a moment of a desire. He cannot figure out to control this desire. It doesn't make any sense. Even a person would say, just bow down. While you're bowing down to this idol, you'll have other thoughts. You're not even thinking about the idol. He has nothing. He's only prostrating himself. A Jew won't do that. Even if it's a meaningless action. So if a Yid is ready to give up, if every Jew is ready to give up his life for God, he cannot control his taiva, cannot control the desire to do something negative. See, that's not a true thing. That shows himself that he has to look at himself and say, I'm acting stupid. I'm foolish. So now, if the hidden love of God has the power to enable her to face death rather than to separate him from God, surely then it's within his power to overcome temptations for lust, for adultery. So this woman that has a lust of adultery is ready to give up. She's a from lady. She's ready to give up a life for God, but she's not ready to not to do adultery. It doesn't make any sense. Which is lighter than the suffering than death. If you're ready to give your life for God, you're not ready to give up the adultery. You're not ready to not do the sin of adultery. It doesn't make sense. That's what the Torah says. It's a moment of insanity. If you thought about it, if the woman thought about it, whoever it is thought about it, would have come to the conclusion, this doesn't make any sense. So it's only the spirit of folly, meaning the notion that a sin will not tear away from godliness. That's the point. So we fool ourselves to think, oh, we're good Jews. We're fine. Everything is fine. So I'm going to do this sin. It's not between me and God. It's between me and my husband, whatever. It has nothing to do with God. I can get away with it. Don't worry. Me and God are good. Me and God are good. God loves me and I love God. Everything is phenomenal. So I'm doing this sin. That is fooling yourself. That leads her to commit adultery. It might be argued, however, that the difference between idolatry and adultery, she regards the former as much more heinous and thus more certain to tear herself from God than the latter. I say, I'm not doing anything against God. I'm doing something against my husband, maybe. Perhaps this differentiation, not the spirit of folly, is why she would sacrifice her life rather than to practice idolatry. Yet at the same time, she could not sacrifice her temptation for adultery. So maybe how can you, the Alter Rebbe is bothered living less. Person bowing down to an idol that's the relationship between man and God. Adultery is between man and man. And the distinction she makes between the prohibition against adultery and against idolatry, that alone, who gam kain ruach, that is the Yetzer Hara. The Yetzer Hara is that reasoning, that you can reason between adultery and idolatry, is that alone. That's your Yetzer Hara trying to make a difference between A and B. That's why the Mishnah says, never evaluate between A and B. They're both given by God. Don't think that adultery is only between humans. Stealing is only between two humans. Etc., etc. No. Everything that the Torah says is between man and man and God. So there's no difference between adultery and idolatry. They're both a separation of God's will. So rends her insensitive to the owner's breach between herself and God that is created by every sin. If she were aware of this breach, she would certainly overcome her desire and refrain from sin. But she just thinks that, no, this is between me and me and man. What is God? This is my personal thing. And it's nothing to do with God. That's her. That alone is the Yetzer Hara who talks her in and tells her, oh, there's nothing. You don't worry. You love God. God loves you. It has nothing to do with God. Everything is good. Everything is good. So this is the stupidity. This is the my Yetzer Hara who's convincing me that this is not a sin. This is not such a terrible sin. It might be a sin, but it's not the end of the world. We will survive this. Yet the spirit of stupidity, folly, envelopes the divine soul only up to, but not including the faculty of chachma. See, the divine, my God, my animalistic soul can fool me, but up to wisdom. If I had wisdom, it wouldn't be able to fool wisdom, because wisdom is bittul. See, everything to wisdom, I can have arguments, and it may be even in the level of understanding, bina and das. I have my das, God's das. How do we bring the two together? Understanding, my understanding, God's understanding. Oh, God will understand me, doesn't understand me. When it comes to chachma, the wisdom, once you touch the wisdom of a person, that's his bittul. That's his koyach ma. Why doesn't anything touch chachma? When the Jew connects, when a person connects to chachma, because in chachma is beluvish, because there's a light of God in chachma that nobody can touch. Nobody can, not my nefesh Bahamas can touch. So everything touches till from my understanding and lower. And that's why a Yid always has to connect to chachma. A Jew should always connect to the wisdom of God. And that's untouchable. That's where a person and God becomes one. That's why Torah is the most important thing, because that's where God and the person becomes one. When the God and the person becomes one, there's no such thing as folly. There's no such thing as stupidity, because he's connected to God, stupidity doesn't even come into the picture. My nefesh Bahamas doesn't come into the picture between me and God. So between me and man, between me and myself, my nefesh Bahamas, my animalistic soul, can get involved and try to convince me. But when I say I'm coming with God, and that's why we learned in the beginning with Tanya, that you should always, that there are three people, the three entities, so to say, me, my godly soul, my nefesh, my animalistic soul. And who's the third entity of Akasav Shlishi, the third verse, so to say, that comes in and stands by the godly soul is God. So then you have two against one. You have my godly soul, God, and my animalistic soul that's against it, struggling with it. So it's always two against one. But that needs to connect myself to my God, to the God in my godly soul. That's chacham. That's ein ois ela Torah. There's no strength but Torah. The more that I learn, the more that I connect to God and Torah, the more God becomes my part of my existence. And therefore, I don't argue with my animalistic soul, because if I try to argue with it intellectually, I might lose, and that's why I do lose many times, because I rationalize, oh, God understands me, or I can do tshuva, or whatever excuse I come up with, why I should do this thing, even though I understand that it's not the right thing to do. But I can come to the conclusion at this present time I can do it. But if I touched my soul, if I touched my chachma, if I went to wisdom, I looked at the Torah, I looked at the truth, and I accentuate the truth, I accentuate God in my life, my nefesh v'amas, my animalistic soul, has no response to that. That's why the Jewish people said Nasa v'nishma. That's the Nasa v'nishma. That is, we will do and understand. That is the Nasa v'nishma v'yid. Because he's touching the chachma of a yid. When you touch the chachma, the wisdom of a Jew, which is the wisdom of God, and we come united as one, there's nothing that can come in between us, in between that concept. Nobody can challenge that concept. There's no challenge to that aspect. Kiniska le'el, as mentioned above. Therefore, when confronting with a matter that directly bears on her faith in God, such as idolatry, where a spirit of folly is powerless, that's it. There's no stupidity in the face of wisdom. She willingly sacrificed her life, but when faced with temptation for adultery, where the spirit of folly can and does conceal her faith in God and her hidden love for him, she succumbs. That's a problem. She falls into the trap. So as long as she doesn't connect to her chakra, she falls into the trap. She falls into the trap of this stupidity. that she can understand that she can do this sin and get away with it. Think she can get away with it. As stated, the subjective distinction between the two stems from the foolishness and from the insensitivity. But if she would face the truth in her wisdom, if a person would face the truth in her wisdom, if a person would look in the mirror and he knows the truth, I feel Aveda Kala, forget about idolatry. Even a most simple sin, what you're going to call as nothing, that simple thing is going against God's will, divine will. And that's the emes. That is the truth. To God, there's no small thing and big thing. To God, there's no major thing and unmajor. To God, there's no such thing. To God, there is those that serve him and those that don't. Those that connect to him and those that don't. And if you don't connect to God at this present moment, when I'm doing this present act, there's no connection to God. That's it. And at that moment, you completely surrendered, sundered yourself, you cut yourself off. That's the truth. So the truth is, at that moment, when I decided that I don't want to, I want to go to a different avenue, even it might be the smallest thing, I at this moment cut myself off from the truth. As I said, the Alter Rebbe said, and at that moment you're totally cut off, and you're worse than the Sitra Achra, you're worse than the sin itself. With a challenge, what you're going through, because the challenge has no choice, and I had the full choice, as the Alter Rebbe said before. And more than all things of this world that are derived from them, you, the person, as that shame behemoths you worse than unclean animals, beasts, and shkotzim and mushing, worse than vermin and reptiles, which all receive the life forms from the three completely unclean klippas. The person who transgresses even a minor sin then is worse than the lower than the klippa and all that derives from it. And the Gemara says, therefore, humans were created last. Humans were created last. Why were humans created last? If the whole purpose of the world is humans, why was in creation humans created last? So the Gemara says, the Talmud says, humans came into the mind of God first, but they're created last. To tell a human that you can be the highest, and chas v'shalom, you can be the lowest. And when you do a sin, yutush kadma kamayma, then the Gemara says, when a person does a sin, then the gnat precedes you. The gnat was created before you. You think it's so important. The gnat, the mosquito, the spider, the cockroach, whatever we discussed, the person, was created in creation before you. Simple meaning of the statement, you have no cause for pride. Even the lowly gnat was created before you. So what is this? You're special. You're the creator the last. The deeper spiritual meaning is the gnat takes precedence over the sinner in rank. That's what the Alter Rebbe wants to tell us. Not only the gnat was always created before me, so what? You can say that everything is created for me. It was created before me because everything was created for me. The Alter Rebbe goes a deeper meaning of the Gemara. It says the meaning of the Gemara that he's created before you. I mean, before you, after you. What's different to God before or after? The important is that there's a capability for the gnat to be greater than you. The gnat is a gnat. The cockroach is a cockroach because that's the way God created it. You might think it's disgusting, but that's the way God created it. He doesn't have a choice to be that or that, something else. But I had the choice to be worse than the cockroach. The Pirush, the Afa Yitush, the Gemara says, Siddur also explains that a gnat, a mosquito, only takes in, doesn't take out, doesn't give out. The Talmud says, consume food, it doesn't exert. The certain animals, a gnat, I think a mosquito also, only takes in, doesn't give out. Every other animal, like a human being, takes in and gives out. Gives out. There's a clipper, there's such a clipper that only takes. Doesn't know what it means to give. That's the lowest level, a person that only takes, clipper that only takes and doesn't want to know what it means to give. That's like a gnat. So I'll feel a yitish kadma. So if you're a taker and not a giver, you're worse than a gnat, because the gnat doesn't have any choice. That's why God created him, to be a taker and not a giver. But I am a giver and I'm a taker and I can be a giver too. And I decide to be a gnat that only takes. It's about me. That's true what an Aveda does. An Aveda says it's about me. I'm willing to do a stupid thing because it's about me. I'm selfish. So a person is willing to do a stupid thing, that the Gemara says, Ein Adam Aveda, person doesn't do a sin unless he gains something out of it. So it's about him, about my gain. So I want to gain. I have a desire, I have a need, whatever it might be. So I have this desire. I have to fulfill my desire. So it's about me. What about the world? What about God? What about another Jew? What do I care about anybody else? I care about myself. So therefore, it's about me. It ain't I mealy. It's all about me. But it's not. That's like a gnat. A gnat also says it's all about him. Doesn't care about the world. Doesn't want to excrete something to somebody else. He wants to do everything for himself. This shows in the lowest level of klippa. But because it's total opposite of kedusha. Kedusha is all about giving. Kedusha, holiness, is all about selflessness. It's all about the other. Klippa is all about selfishness, ego, self. So you have somebody who, takes in self, but also gives a little bit. Then you have the gnat who doesn't know what it means to give. But the Eibush created him that way. He didn't decide not to give. God created him to be a taker and not a giver. So that shows in a concept where a person says, it's about me. It's not about God. It's not about somebody else. It's about me. Are you going to hurt God? You're going to hurt somebody else? Who cares? What do I care about anybody else? It's about me. So that's the situation. When God gives itself, even those far away from it, that's Kedusha. For holiness implies humility, which leads to kindness and to benevolence, while Klippa represents egocentric and selfishness. Now, even the very lowest Klippa, symbolized by a gnat, takes precedence over a sinner. In the order of descent of the divine light from the divine will. So ultimately, the gnat says, you are a person, you're lower than me. This means that Klippa, symbolized by the gnat, derives itself life force from the higher level of godliness than that which the sinner sustains. Because the sinner had free choice. The gnat, the mosquito, had no free choice. And so too all unclean creatures. Even ferocious creatures. All these do not deviate from the divinely intent purpose. The cat will always be a cat. The lion will always be a lion. The cow will always be a cow. The pig will always be a pig. Upugudasi is bara shamam ruchan, and the divinely intent purpose, but all obey God, although they can't perceive it. For the animal can't perceive God's command, yet the spirit perceives it, and they know what they're supposed to do. Meaning, the life force animates them, which is aware of the divine will, does not permit them to act in a violation of it. So therefore, the cat will always be a cat, and a lion will always eat. It will always rip off another. Will rip another animal. So that's the way God made it. It's not good or evil. It's not. It's the way it is. But then it's written, the fear and dread of you shall lie upon every beast of the earth. The Eibush says, I'm going to put something in you that the animals will be fearful from you. And the Gemara says, what does that mean? And the Gemara answers, that the wild beast will never defy a human being unless he appears to be like an animal. I always thought about this Gemara when dogs bark at me. I always think, what are the dogs saying to me? Maybe the dogs are talking to me. They're saying to me, if we had the choice, we'd bite you. You're not looking like you're supposed to look like. I don't know. They might be screaming at me and telling me that you better start shaping up. And therefore, tzaddikim she'ain tzelem lekim estalep b'pneim, and therefore tzaddikim, that their face of divine image never departs them. Kol chayis rois is kafkamayim. It says that all the wild beasts are humble before them. As the Zohar writes concerning Daniel, who was thrown into the lion's den. So not only did the lions not harm him, but on the contrary, they humbled themselves before him. Right? So in essence, it was not a miracle. We make a big deal of the miracle of Daniel in the lion's den. It's not a miracle. He walked in with the Tzelem Elokim, so the lions, the pasuk says, the fear of the lions will appear upon them. So if he was a tzaddik, that's a natural response of the lions. If he wasn't a tzaddik, they would have eaten him. So the miracle would have been if he wasn't a tzaddik and they didn't eat him. That's a miracle. Because the lions look at him like another animal, they would rip him apart. So it would be a miracle that they didn't do that. But Daniel was a tzaddik. So he walked into the den of lions, of hungry lions, and not only didn't they touch him, as it's brought down Daniel, they laid down before him. So in essence, because this was a tzaddik walking it, and the Gemara brings many examples, even in the stories of lions. When the lion came into a city, they used to send out the Tana, who would tame the lion and walk the lion back to its place. So because he's a tzaddik, he walks with the image of God. The Torah says openly that the lion will be afraid of you. That's one of the things of Kelev Leyechetz, Kelev L'Shenei, that at that moment, the dog, even the dog, realized the greatness of the Jews. It says in the pasuk that the Eibishter gave the Chena'am, God gave the grace of the people over Egypt, that all humanity saw the greatness of the Jew. And not only that, even the dog saw the greatness of the Jew. And that's why the dog did not bark or wet its tongue, whatever the expression. So why? Because they wish to put the grace of the people upon the whole people. When the dog looked at the person, he saw the grace of God upon him. So what is he gonna bark? He's gonna show humility to the grace of God, because the dog has no choice once he sees that concept. The pasuk says, it's an open pasuk, that your fear shall be upon the animals of the earth. So, at any rate, what emerges from the above is that even animals do not violate God's will. That's really what the Alter Rebbe wants to bring out over here. The animal will always be the animal. The famous story of the Rambam, Maimonides, who they disagreed with, and they said, we can teach a cat how to be a waiter. He told them that you can teach a cat how to be a waiter, but a cat will always stay a cat. And after many months, they brought him to the palace, and the cat was being a waiter, and he took out a mouse, as the story is told, and he let a mouse run down the palace, and the cat dropped his plate and everything and ran after the mouse, because the cat is a cat, and that's the way God created a cat, to run after a mouse or anything that he thinks is a mouse. Therefore, it's clear that who sins, that anybody that sins. And the main thing of sin is that it goes against the will of God. That's the main thing, the concept of sin. I feel about Veda Kali, even if it's a minor offense, what he thinks is minor. B'shas Maisa, at that moment when I do a sin, at this moment when I'm doing the sin, I have to realize that's it. Because a Beinoni needs to live in the moment. It's a very important thing. A Beinoni needs to live in the moment. That means he needs to evaluate everything that's happening right now. Can't take care of the past. He doesn't know what's going to be in the future. Not a tzaddik that sees the future. Beinoni lives in the moment. So therefore, we're not talking what you did in the past. Hopefully you do tshuva. I don't know what's going to be in the future. I know right now. So right now, in this moment, and something comes to me as a challenge, can I control it? Yes or no? That's it. Don't tell me what I did in the past. Don't tell me what's going to happen in the future. Right now. Can I control this action right now? And now you have to say to yourself, I don't want to separate myself from God right now. That doesn't mean that not gonna have the challenge in a moment later, or that, oh, the past you were not a tzaddik, you didn't overcome the challenge. I don't care with the past. I don't know about the future. I know right now. Shas Maisa, very important letter words to a regular person. B'shas Maisa, right now. A person say, I, right now, when I do this thing, person comes to me, wants to talk Lashon Hara, right now, I'm going to talk this Lashon Hara, right now, I'm cutting myself from God. That's it. So I'm doing. This Aveda is cutting myself off from God. And now I don't want to do it. That's it. That's a simple thing. I control myself right now. I don't know if I'm going to control myself later. I knew maybe I didn't control myself in the past. But it doesn't have to do it right now. He commits it, he completely removed himself from the divine holiness, meaning from God's unity and oneness. That's it. You might think, it's a law. Well, who cares? No, right now, this is going away from God's will. That's a truth, big or small. And therefore, again, the Rebbe again wants that a person should imagine what it means. What it means. It means simple, that you're basically worse than an animal right now. You can do tshuva, hopefully, but that doesn't do it right now. Right now is right now. You ultimately imagine right now you're lower than a vermin and a reptile, which you derive their sustenance from Sitra Achra and Klippa and Avodah Zarah. Look at all these things. It's impure animals. They did nothing wrong, but they're called behemoths, hatmeas. Whether they did something or didn't know, the Eibishter made them impure animals, and you cannot eat them. And they come from klippas hatmeas. They come from impurity. They are impure, and if their body dies, they are impure. They're impure in life. They're impure in death. They're impure people, impure entities. Why would I want to be lower than impurity right now? So all of the Racine demonstrates how the hidden love of God can enable him to overcome his desire to judge against the right now. Let me connect to my essence, my truth. I'm a godly entity. I am part of God. I can never actually disconnect myself from God. So here, a godly entity, somebody who's with God right now, somebody who is connected to God right now. Why would I want to do this? He considers that thereby he becomes separate from God, even more than that unclean creatures. He will recoil. Hopefully, that will recoil him. That will say, "Oh, this is not a good thing. I got to get away from this." From every sin, just as it recoils from the thought of idolatry. If somebody would come over to me and say, "Let's go to worship an idol. Let's go to church," you would say no. Thank you, but no, thank you. You wouldn't say, "Let me think about it. Let me talk to somebody." You say no. And no. That's it. Not interested. I have no interest. But when my Nefesh Bahamas comes and tells me, do A, he might be schlepping you to the same thing. It's exact same thing. I should stop evaluating that when my animal soul comes and tells me to do something wrong, that he's not asking me to go and worship an idol. It's the exact same thing. I have to imagine the exact same thing. Of course, it is the exact thing. And that's when the moment of folly comes in. No, it's not the same thing. Relax. You're not going to Avodah Zarah. You're not going to church by doing this act. To a Jew, you are. So he recalls, even every sin recalls the thought of idolatry because of his awareness that it represents attack on his love of God and his faith in him. And that's more important to see when we worry about the outcome of the sin, when we're not worried about the actual what's happening at this present moment. Siddur wanted a person should not worry about the outcome of a sin. He should worry about this happening at the moment of the sin. If we would think about the moment of the sin, we never come to sin. But we're fooling ourselves that nothing's happening in this moment. And the greatest thing is happening. What's the greatest thing? The greatest thing is that at this moment, the truth is Whatever it might be, I'm cutting myself off from God at this moment. Okay, beautiful, beautiful Tanya. Today is the 15th day of the month, Tu B'Shvat, and it's chapter 77 and 78 in your Tillim. The Rebbe writes today on the 15th day of Shvat. It's a beautiful story. The Alter Rebbe's teachings were ultimately printed by his grandson, the Tzemach Tzedek, third Lubavitcher Rebbe. So when the second part of the Torah was about to be printed, the Chassidim knew that the Tzemach Tzedek, Alter Rebbe's grandson, had written glosses and commentaries on those Maimorim. They knew that Tzemach Tzedek wrote things in the Maimer. He wrote his own interpretation of what the Alter Rebbe wanted to say on the Maimer, and they pleaded him to publish these with the Maimer. They wanted him to publish. When he publishes the Maimer, when the Torah comes out, he should put his index. He should put his words in it. But he said, "What do you mean? I'm not." He refused. He said, "I'm not going to do this. It's the Alter Rebbe. I'm not going to touch the Alter Rebbe's Maimer. I'm not touching my grandfather's Maimer. I'm going to print the Maimer the way the Alter Rebbe said it." But then he had a dream. He had a cholam. And the Alter Rebbe came to him in his dream, and he told him that no, you should print it. You should print in the Maimer. You should put your index in the Maimer. But he revealed that he never told anybody that he had this dream. So therefore, nobody knew about the dream, and he kept on refusing to do this as they were working on printing this book. But then the Tzemach Tzedek had a couple of children. Only after 3 of his sons came to him and said they had the same dream, that the Alter Rebbe came, the great-grandfather came to them and told them, "Tell your father, the Tzemach Tzedek, that I want him to print his index in the Maimer before he prints it out. He should put his index in it." So when his 3 sons came to him and told him that, listen, each one came to him separately and said, "We had a dream. The Alter Rebbe came to us and said, you should put this in the Maimer." He said that he agreed. So he agreed to have his glosses and his commentary printed with the second part of Torah, which is now called Likutei Torah. That's what there's 2 parts to the Alter Rebbe. This is my book. Besides the Tanya, you have Torah and Likutei Torah, which is also part of the Alter Rebbe's teachings. And he put it in Likutei Torah. You have the notes of the Tzemach Tzedek, which he put into that part of it. I want to wish you all a wonderful day, Mitcham, at 10 o'clock. And now we're going to have a beautiful class of the Rebbe on the Rashi at 10 a.m. on our Rashi of this week's Parsha. And the way the Rebbe learns the Rashi and the Chumash at 10 a.m. I wish you all a happy Tu B'Shvat. I hope everybody has some fruits, eats some fruit, and especially the fruits of Eretz Yisrael. And Mitcham, we'll see you all tomorrow. Continue 8 a.m. the Chitas of the day. Have a wonderful one.